Good evening, Book War. I'm just gonna give a couple minutes for Hattie to pop on here pretty soon. She's usually pretty darn quick at this, so alright. I just feel a little bit far away from the microphone or the camera. Anyhow, there she is.
Okay, there we go. Okay, I'm seeing me, but you are super stalled out. Are you there? Oh.
I am here, but yeah, you're twirling. Oh, you're twirling, sis. We'll see if maybe she pops out and comes back in. For those who have joined, I'd love to hear anything that you might be reading right now, anything that might be interesting to you, books that you're liking. But yeah, we'll just wait till Hattie she usually has to, always takes 2 times for her to get on the right network. I don't know why. But good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Just as a reminder, we're going to be talking about one of my absolute favorite books. It's a comfort read for me called A Town Like Alice by Neville Shute. Hattie read it for the very first time. She knows the story from the Masterpiece Theater movie, but hopefully she will be popping back on here. Okay, she says she thinks she's back. Let me invite her again. Try this again. Take 2. Better.
Are we gonna work this time?
You never know. You just never know.
Yeah, I yelled at George for not reminding me that I have to change my network on my phone. Because I was sitting here for like 3 or 4 minutes. I was like, oh, okay. I was like all set and ready to go. So I should have been like checking my network and getting it all. But no, I forgot.
Well, it's okay.
So George has been duly chastised for not reminding me.
Good job. Good job. So I just want to say hi to the folks who joined us and who have said hello back. And Hattie, I just reminded everybody that we're talking about one of my favorite books, A Town Like Alice by Neville Shute. And I do have 2 copies. Well, I have 3 copies, but these are the 2 editions I currently have next to me. So, but this was your first time reading this story.
It was.
So tell us your reactions.
Okay. So Hannah and I sort of like grew up with this story. Hannah had read it several times, but we watched the like movie miniseries or whatever it was from like
it had to be Mobile Masterpiece Theater.
Yeah, because you think it was the 80s, Hannah, or the 90s maybe when 90s. It was made?
Must have been the 90s.
Yeah, probably. I'm not sure. Anyway, I've seen like that version, that movie version of this story many times. And I loved the story. Like there wasn't anything wrong with the story. I just like never really gotten around to reading the book. So first reaction on the reading the actual book was, first off, the story is still great. The story's like, it's a great story, and the way it's told is really fantastic. The thing that was jarring that I wasn't expecting, and I'm just interested to know if this triggered with you at all too, was the extremely like racist language that was used. They weren't using it in derogatory ways most of the time, but it was just part of this story. Were these like really like racist characterizations of groups of people, and like and the language, the words that were used for certain groups of people throughout the story. It was just sort of like, it was something that didn't register either A, because I wasn't really coherent to it when I watched the movie as a teenager, or it wasn't really part of, and I don't know because I haven't seen the movie for so long. So
I'm literally 5 pages from the end. That's why I was a little tardy. I was trying so hard. I'm 5 pages from the end. And then I do plan on actually watching the movie sometime this week. So I will let you know. But I don't think the movie carried that language and that part of like, what would have been 1950s, late 40s, early 50s.
Yeah, definitely.
Colonial colonization language, right? Which is really what, I mean, it is deeply racist out of this kind of like idea, the colonizing idea that like, you know, we're the right, we're obviously the better
White people are better than any other people.
Everybody else.
And the copyright on the story was 1950 as well. So, you know.
Yeah. So he's, you know, it's in that time period and is being written by somebody in that time period. And I do want to say, as one who very rarely like let any author off the hook on that, because I don't care most of the time, and I still don't think he gets off the hook. Like, it is racist language, it is derogatory, it is all of those things. And I do think it can be very distracting from the story, particularly if you've never read it before. I did notice it, which I thought was interesting, but it was also interesting that, and the Australian black and white is so different than the American experience of black and white.
Yep.
And the English and the UK's black and white, like how those things happened. And this book does not go into any of that. It's just, it is that kind of day-to-day life interactions. But that would be an interesting thing to learn more about, is Australia's indigenous community and the relationship between the colonizer and the colonized, and how they're moving into the 21st century as well. I don't actually know anything about that.
Yeah, I don't really know much about that either. Yeah, to be perfectly honest. It was just one of those things that as I was reading it, because like the words are in front of you, right? As you're reading, and then like, and then there were just like particular characterizations of like the Japanese soldiers, right? Because they're, you know, Japanese soldiers have taken over Malaysia, and you know that's part of the story. And so there's a lot of just like characterizations of like phrases such as like, oh, that's, you know, like something like to the effect that like that's just how, like, I won't say words because I don't like the words, but like basically the characterization of like all Japanese people are like
exactly.
And then of course they like were doing something that demonstrated whatever this sort of like racist characterization was, you know, and just I think as a person who's living in 2022 with this like very much at the forefront of our minds right now, and how not only ubiquitous it is, but how harmful it is, even when it's not meant to be harmful. Because in this book, that's not what this book is about at all. Like there isn't, it's not sort of this like blatantly racist characterization of people, and like that's not what it's trying to do at all. It's peripheral at best, right? But it's still this sort of like underlying current that is very damaging, right? And it's a little damaging to the story to someone who's reading it in 2022 when this is very, you know, very much in the forefront of our thoughts, and how damaging even just this kind of language can be
representation,
a day-to-day, you know, way, like it's nothing, you know. So but like that was honestly like that was just the one and only thing that as I was reading the story that sort of like gave me pause, you know, that like gave me this sort of like hiccup of like, oh man, like I just wish that wasn't there, you know. I'm not sure you tell the story very well without it, maybe.
Well, I mean, and that's the hard, I mean, and that's just like the hard part of it too, like, because I was just thinking about the movie a little bit, and I do know when they're in Australia and she sets up the ice cream parlor. And I'm pretty sure it is in the movie that they talk about that she has to have a separate section for the indigenous people of Australia. So, you know, like that whole idea of separate, right? Can't do things together. That's probably the only thing I can like pick up right off the top that was in both, but I'm like 90% sure there was probably some stuff in the Malaysia section that
Sure.
I haven't seen that movie for so long that I probably didn't even notice.
Yeah.
As I was watching it as a young person.
Right.
To now, but it is certainly. I want to say that I'm not sure I'm going to say this in the best way, but it's certainly accurate to its time and its characters and what these particular people in these particular positions at these particular times in history,
yep,
what would have been true. And I'm going to use appropriate in air quotes there because it's not appropriate, but
yeah.
And there is some really interesting, sorry, it's not interesting misogyny. That's what I was going to say. There is some really interesting misogyny in this book as well.
Is there now, Hannah?
It's kind of interesting that I actually like this story sometimes. But I think part of it for me is in this time of deep racism, deep misogyny, sexism, like, literally, she can't actually have her own money. She has to have men help her. And as soon as she's married, then it'll be fine.
Right? Then it's fine. Yeah, I know.
Then you can have all of your inheritance. I can't even with that stuff. But there is also something like really beautiful about the relationship particularly that Noel finds in having a relationship with Jean.
Yeah.
And that spirit of women who just get up and do. And I also, this is such a, you're gonna like, oh yeah, that's totally you. The other thing I love about Jean and where she puts her money, I'm just at the end of this, so that's kind of like what it's about right now too, but it isn't about making money. She's not using her inheritance to make more money. She's using her inheritance to create community, and particularly community for women in a place that they don't have. But in creating community for women, she creates community for everybody.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's so beautiful. And it's like, well, of course, but like, that's not what people do. Or how we understand the value of money. And they're talking about the investment, and it's all like in this, not diverse at all. It's like all in this one particular place. So anyway, but there's a lot of sexism in this one too.
Yeah, lots of sexism. I was also thinking, just as I don't know that I thought about it until just now when we were talking about it a little bit more, but there is a little bit of like the savior complex, though, this sort of like white man's burden, even with her, right? Like I love, like I'm totally with you on everything like about her and like all of the amazing things that she's sort of doing, but there is still sort of that underlying, I don't even know if it's underlying, it might be right on top, but this sort of like white man's burden that, like, you know, this rich English lady has to go to Australia to not only save the Australians, who, you know, the white people in Australia, but then of course also all the, you know, the native people, by building this community, right? Like, because clearly they can't do it themselves. Like, I do think that there was like a little bit of like that in there as well.
Right. Well, and her going back to Malaysia to build a well, right? Like, I mean, that is very much in that you know, I have to give back as well. Like, I can't actually just receive care. But now that I have so much that I need to, and that's a beautiful gesture, and it can come with a little bit of condescension, or a lot, depending.
Yeah, depending. With her, it's just a little. I mean, I do think like for her in the story, she's definitely like doing these things out of place of altruism and care and generosity, genuine generosity and authenticity, which is, I think, why it doesn't come across like the white man's burden until you like sort of take that step back and start thinking, oh, wait a minute, what's the context and what's actually happening? And then it's like, oh, this rich white lady from England had to go and save the village, you know, that saved her. Right. You know, and then she had to go to Australia and save them too. You know, you don't get that until you sort of like come away from it for a minute, because in the book and the way she's written, this really is a very sort of altruistic and genuine and authentic care that she, you know, wants to contribute to the world, right?
And it is a different model of of what happens when you inherit. Like it's a
Yeah.
different model of economy
Yeah.
than what the expectation of that is.
Yeah.
Which I do, I mean, I do think that is true. Like, and I think that part, it steps outside of the bounds, yet still within the larger kind of white savior complex.
Yeah. Box.
Some of the capitalistic, it steps outside of our economic expectations, but it still lives inside the colonizers.
Well, just to like go back to it, it's also like she couldn't just like do this though. Like she had to have like 16 approvals before she could do any of this stuff, right? So it's like she couldn't even like say on her own, like, okay, this is what I want to do with my money. It was like, oh, I have this idea. Here's all my reasons for why I want to do this idea. Can I please have money? And so then Noel would take it and like sit with it for a day and a half, and then he went and talked to his partner to see what he thought about it. You know, and then he had to like go and talk to Joe once Joe came into the picture. And it's sort of, so then it sort of becomes, you know, all of these men, you know, deciding, well, okay, this is a little different, and it's not normally what we would, you know, think you should do with your money, but we've decided
that it's okay.
That it's okay.
You can have your money.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know. Talk about condescension, right?
Well, and you know, and we still see this today, right? With women and money, like the whole Britney thing, and it's happening with Wendy Wilson right now too, and like, and that condescension and that like control of women, and powerful women and rich women, through money. And there's lots of stuff around both of those, and I don't know nearly enough to really speak to it widely, but like, this isn't old. This is like still happening.
It's like, this isn't a thing that just happened in the 50s, people.
But I do still love this book because it's like my comfort, right?
Absolutely.
And when I went home I went to my parents on Friday, and I was sitting there reading it, and it is one of I read a lot of books, and I read a lot of books that are from multiple perspectives. And in our current generation of writers, that usually comes with like one chapter as one person, right?
Yeah.
This entire book is story within story within story.
Yeah.
And it is so readable and so wonderful and so well constructed.
Yeah.
That you don't even know that like, it is not jarring, or it's just so wonderfully woven.
Yeah.
And because Nola's telling this whole story, but it's him being told a story within this story, and it's just, man, I was thinking like, man, authors don't do that anymore.
No, it's hard, right? I mean, that just goes to show, like, Neville Shute was like, he's a classic writer for a really, you know, good reason. Right? He knows how to write, you know, and you're absolutely right. As you're reading it along, you're like, oh wait, is Noel actually telling the story again, or is this now actually Jean telling Noel the story that Noel is now telling us?
Right.
Yeah. And even the same thing with Joe, when like Joe comes and sees Noel, it's like Joe's telling him story, but then he's telling us then the story that Joe is telling him.
Well, and then it becomes Joe's telling Jean, and Jean's telling Joe, who are then telling, Jean is then telling Noel, and Noel is now telling us. Like,
it's crazy.
But it's
so flawless. It's flawless.
It's flawless. It is just flawless. And it's across 3 continents, which blows my mind sometimes when I think about, like, it's not that big of a book.
No, it's not. I mean, my modern version is like 350 pages.
Yeah. And like, and it's so epic in many ways still too, right? It does cross this beautiful space. And I think it's an interesting exploration into this generation who lived through World War II.
Yeah.
And like, even the pieces around like Noel or Aggie at the end, like she doesn't live with her husband anymore. and she's married, but she doesn't live with her husband anymore after the war, and she ends up going from England to middle of Australia to, like, you know, work at a shop or a factory in that case, but like
factory, yeah, run the factory, but yeah,
run the factory, yeah, exactly. She runs the factory.
She's running the factory, yeah. Let's just
To be clear,
yeah.
But I do think it's a really interesting exploration on like the what must have felt segmented part of that generation's life.
Yeah.
Like there was the war, and for Noel there was before the war,
right?
And then there was the war, and then there was this post-war thing, and then there was this almost like how do we reconstruct life
how to
together?
make life again,
right?
Yeah. Well, and even Gene sort of says that to Nola, or, you know, he's telling us that Gene sort of said that like this whole experience of being in Tunisia, it felt like just this other sort of lifetime, this other thing that like just happened, and it was there. But then, you know, then she came home to England, and then, like, you know, she went to go work as a secretary. You know, it's so like, the experiences are so different that there was sort of no way for her or for any of the people who would have lived through this kind of thing.
There's like no integration of that, right? How do you go from, you know, sewing rice patties to a secretary at a handbag place in England, like in London, and like those are my two lives. Like that's just there's So it's a wonderful it is a wonderful story, even, you know, but as all stories, it comes with complications and issues, and I would say, I mean, I read more other Neville Shute as well. One of his other one of his other favorite books of mine is called Checkerboard, and it's about a Black American soldier in England, in the UK during World War II, and like what that was like, kind of that story. And I think the interesting thing about Neville Shute, and I think he's trying to hit some of this with the sexism in this particular book, is I think it feels like, or to me it feels like tropes on this end in 2022. But I wonder if in 1950, when these books are being published, if this is like an edge. I don't know.
I would say pushing the boundaries a little. I don't know.
Yeah, pushing some boundaries around what's acceptable, or at least making people think about it. Because there's not any not thinking about it really in some of his books. So, but I don't know. It's an interesting, not as an excuse, but just.
But no, and everything's contextual, right? Like when he was writing this, you know, and every writer, whether it's a novelist or a historian or anything in between, every writer has their own purpose, right? In doing what they're doing, they kind of have their own agenda, right? And that doesn't mean I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean like when anybody writes something, they have a reason for writing. And I think contextually, I wouldn't be surprised if he was sort of pushing the boundaries a little bit, or at least calling out some things, right? Like the sexism in this book in particular. I haven't read. I don't know if I read Checkerboard or not. It's on my shelf actually. Dad gave me a copy. I got a hardback copy of that. You know, but telling this story of this you know, Black American soldier in England during World War II or World War I?
World War II. Yeah,
World War II. Just even telling that story, whatever that story was, telling that story, I feel like in the 50s, just telling the story is pushing, right?
Yeah,
that's
a little
pushing.
bit.
Yeah, a little bit, especially for a white guy, right? I mean, Shute is, you know, about, you know, as lily white. He's English, I presume. Yeah. As you can get. So somebody like him, who is a renowned author, sort of telling this kind of a story, whether it's a Checkerboard with the racism issues, or Town Like Alice with the colonial issues, and then the sexism race issues, you know, that he's sort of at least talking about peripherally, if not, you know, sort of.
Well, I mean, that conversation between Noel and her McFadden, right? Like her uncle, it's pretty like right out there.
Yeah.
And like I say this as a white lady. Just but like the kind of like adorable crouching grouchiness of Noel, like being like, okay, like I am conservative, but like that's too
But like
far.
you're going too far, yeah.
35 is too far.
I know.
But like he's like so conservative and like so like stifled in so many ways, and then like he just happened to meet somebody who was just
Who was
that
even
much
more
more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it is a great story. I loved reading it. I have to say, it's definitely one that will stay on my shelf. Like, I'm not going to send you this one to put in your a little mini library or anything.
Okay.
So that one's going to stay on my shelf. And I also have to, this is the funniest, I think this is the funniest part, and maybe you knew this, but did you ever know from the movie why it was called A Town Like Alice?
You don't in the movie. No.
I never knew why it was called that until I read this book. And then I'm like, oh, that makes sense. I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but it's like I'm like,
I don't think it's ever in the movie. I don't think it is.
No idea. Like I knew Alice was Alice Springs. Like I knew that part. That was the reference there. But I'm like, why the heck is this movie called that? I had no idea until I read it.
And again, I have to remember, I haven't seen the movie for a really long time. I don't think it is in the movie because Noel, I don't know if this is super, I'm trying to decide if it's a spoiler or not. Because the movie ends at their marriage. And then Noel tells a little bit more of the story. But it ends at their marriage. And the book, it's a love story. And so they get married. Sorry.
Hannah's really good at spoiling things. FYI. Everyone, Hannah's really good at spoiling things. I cannot tell you how many things are spoiled for me.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I am
good at it.
Like sometimes I'm not sure what is a spoiler and what's not sometimes. But anyway, but so I don't think in the movie, it ends there. Very much like a rom-com. This is not a rom-com. To be clear,
it's not. No.
The movie is not a rom-com. I think the movie does such a wonderful job of really, it's using its source material well.
Yes.
And it does have to make some changes. It does like move some things about, and some of the relationships are slightly different. But I do think it does hold really well to the source material in a way that you can love both.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. Like I'd only seen the movie when I read the book, and I felt like as I'm reading the book, I'm like, okay, this is like basically the movie. There was a lot more in the book in Australia.
Yes.
In terms of like Jean in Australia and what she's doing and her life and sort of the nitty gritty of what that looks like. There was way more in the book than in the movie, which then sort of eventually in the book kind of actually leads to why it's called A Town Like Alice. And then you don't get that in the movie because that kind of is much
truncated.
In the movie, in the film. So you don't get that. But I legit did not know why it was ever called that until I read the book.
Yeah.
So.
And the other thing that the movie does, which is not going to be surprising to anybody, is one of the things I love about this book is there's not, I want to say there's not a great deal of conflict between the characters. Like there's not this, like, oh, we had a miscommunication. Oh, I'm mad at you because of this, and this. And there's just not that. That's not how the plot moves at all. And again, like, how hard is that to write an engaging story that isn't using inner conflict between characters? Neville Shute can do it.
He can do it.
But the movie heightens that conflict in a lot of different ways to like, and also
moving,
right. Yeah. If you're gonna have actors,
they gotta do something.
You gotta do something with their face. So, anywho, that is definitely our time for A Town Like Alice. But
absolutely. But it was a good one. So good. Comfort read. And our other comfort read this month was The Hobbit, which was good. And I just finished my Lord of the Rings marathon literally 20 minutes before we had to get on this tonight. Yeah. So yay for comfort reads in August.
I'm 5 pages. And after I read The Hobbit, I had to come home and I did a movie marathon of The Three Hobbits, then The Lord of the Rings, and I have every intention of watching this when I finish the book. And it too is probably
it's epic. Is it 6? Oh yeah, because I think it was a mini series or something.
I think it's like 3 separate parts, and they're like an hour and a half to 2 hours each.
Yeah. It's kind of epic.
It is, but I mean, it is mobile masterpiece theater.
There you
So,
go.
and did you see, Hattie, that this was Aunt Kay's book?
Oh, I couldn't read it. I could see that there was a bunch of, oh yeah, look at that. Tabor?
3 generations.
That's amazing.
I know, right?
I love it. Yep.
Yeah, I love that too. So anyway,
That's great.
I don't know. We don't have anything really to announce per se.
No, we don't have any. We haven't really discussed what we're going to do for our Biblio Talks next month. So you'll just have to, check our blog and our Instagram for info.
We'll let you know.
We'll figure it out.
When we decide.
When we figure that out. Yeah, exactly. But other than that, I think we can just wrap it up because I think we're good to go.
Yeah. If you've enjoyed this, please feel free to like and follow us here on Instagram as well, or if you use Facebook, or we are also on YouTube as The Book War. And you can also go to www.thebookwar.com and sign up for our newsletter that has been monthly and we think might be going bi-monthly. Meaning every 2 months, not twice a month. But yes, to be clear. Yeah. So, August and September August has been a month. But no, so hopefully, and whatever you're reading, let us know. We'd love to hear about it, particularly if it's something that you think we should be reading, and one of us will probably pick it up at some point.
Probably. At some point.
All right. So thanks, sis.
Yep. Thanks, Ann. Bye, everybody. Have a really good Sunday night.
Sounds good.